Hello and welcome to The Art of Aging, part of the Abundant Aging podcast series from United Church Homes. On this show, we look at what it means to age in America and in other places in the world with positive and empowering conversations that challenge, encourage, and inspire all to age with abundance. Today, I am pleased to welcome Jeanette Leardi to our conversation. Jeanette is a social gerontologist, community educator, writer, public speaker, and aging wellness leader who has a passion for empowering older adults and helping them identify and share their wisdom with others. She's the author of the currently published book, Aging Sideways, Changing Our Perspectives on Getting Older. Her decade of experiences as a caregiver to her parents inspired her encore career goals of changing perceptions about the aging process and promoting awareness of elders' inherent dignity, wisdom, and unique value as mentors and catalysts for social change. Leardi's efforts include giving engaging in-person and virtual presentations, workshops, and classes to people of all ages, writing articles for Next Avenue, Third Act Magazine, and other publications, and appearing in national media, including the New York Times, Forbes, Fortune, and NPR show Here and Now. Her editorial experiences include positions at Newsweek, Life, People, Condé Nast, Traveler, and Sesame Street magazines, and the Charlotte Observer. She has a master's degree with honors in English from Rutgers University and in Gerontology graduate certificate from the University of North Carolina at Charlotte. Welcome, Jeanette.
Thank you, Beth. Thanks for the opportunity to speak with you today.
And just a reminder that this podcast series is sponsored by the Center for Abundant Aging. To learn more about the center, including our annual symposium in October, visit www.abundantaging.org. So one of the first questions that we often ask folks, Jeanette, is what, besides your own aging process, because we're all aging, what has brought you to this space and has fueled your own passion to the work that you're called to do right now?
Well, the great question to start with, because people ask me, well, how did you become a gerontologist? What's that about? First of all, a lot of people don't know that they think a gerontologist is a geriatrician. Geriatricians are medical doctors, like psychiatrists are medical doctors. Gerontologists are like psychologists. We study the field, so we study the aging process. I started out as a writer and editor of educational materials for children, actually. So I'm at both ends of the aging spectrum, and I still do that. I still write for children as well. But when I was in my 50s, late 40s and early 50s, I'm 73 right now, I became the caregiver to both my parents sequentially and simultaneously for about 10 years. And I was out of the job market. I had no income, and this was a really intense period of time for all of us. And I was so appalled at the way it was so hard to get them what we call person-centered care that treats them as the individuals they are, treats them with dignity, treats them with respect. So after they both passed away, I was just so blown away by how people didn't seem to understand what aging was about. So I went back to graduate school, and that's when I got my grad certificate. So actually, being a caregiver gave me my encore career. I didn't predict it. I had no idea it was going to happen, but it was just an issue that meant so much to me that I had to explore it, and that's what I continue to do.
Absolutely. And, the bits that I know about your story is not only did it take you out of your career, stepping away for a bit, but you also moved, right?
Yeah. I was on the East Coast first. I was born and raised in New York City for the first 38 years of my life. Then I moved to Charlotte, North Carolina in 1990 and was there for 22 years. And then after both parents passed away, I moved to Portland, Oregon, and I've been here for 13 years now.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Not many people do those cross-country moves. You specifically describe yourself as a social gerontologist. What does that specifically mean?
Social gerontology, there are all different fields of gerontology. You can be an environmental gerontologist, you could be a clinical gerontologist, you could do all kinds of things. Social gerontology studies how society views the aging process, as well as the different social factors that determine how well we age. So a lot of times we think, well, we only age based on our genetics, and our own physical abilities. But there are a lot of other social factors that also affect how well we age. What race we are, what gender we are, where we live. Do we live in an urban environment or a rural environment? How much education we've gotten, what our income level is. So a social gerontologist is interested in exploring all the different ways that our cultural, environmental factors affect how well we age.
Yeah, absolutely. We don't age in isolation. And I just had a conversation yesterday with somebody who, was kind of making light of the fact, it's her way of dealing with it, that there is dementia history in their family, and just kind of being resigned to, well, I'm going to end up with dementia.
You might want to actually let your friend know, or this person know, that 40 to 50% of all dementias can be either slowed down, prevented, or reversed by lifestyle changes.
Exactly.
How much quality sleep we get, what kind of food we eat, how much exercise. So it's not inevitable. In fact, it's hardly inevitable that we would get dementia as we get older.
And it's so hard to fit all that information in the midst of a conversation when they've already made up their mind. So yeah, maybe I need to send some articles following up with that conversation.
Maybe you need to recommend my book.
Exactly. So speaking of aging sideways, talk about that term and what that means, and why you use that for the title of your book.
I meant that title to be provocative. If you look behind me, you'll see the cover of my book, and the title's on a slant, and I meant it that way. That's supposed to be provocative. I got the idea from a book written by an art teacher named Betty Edwards in 1979 called Drawing on the Right Side of the Brain. Some of your listeners may already be familiar with that book. If you're not, I highly recommend it. It's a really interesting book. She would give her students lots of different art exercises, and one exercise she gave them was called upside down drawing. She would give them a picture of something, let's say a chair, and ask them to draw exactly what they saw. So they did. They would, give it their best shot. But then she would have them turn the photograph upside down and then tell them, draw exactly what you see. And what that did was put their left brain analytical preconceived notion of chairness idea to sleep. And the right hemisphere took over, and what they would see were just the lines and the spaces between the lines. And when they drew from the upside down photo and then turned their drawings right side up, those drawings were far more accurate than the drawing that they made when they first were looking at the chair right side up. So I thought, maybe we're looking at aging the same way. We've got these preconceived notions. We've got blinders on. We think we know what aging is about. But what if we, just kind of shifted our perspective and turned our minds? You don't have to turn them completely upside down, but maybe just, shift them to the side a little and say, I'm not sure we're thinking about aging or seeing aging the right way. So that's how I got the idea for the book, Aging Sideways. It's these quirky, unexpected, but more accurate ways of viewing aging.
I love it. So what are some of the strategies that you see and that you suggest for aging more productively or more positively might be the better way to talk about it?
Well, I've come up with like four strategies for having the sideways approach to aging. The first sideways approach is the idea of being more flexible. So in other words, sidestepping a deeply embedded obstacle you're approaching rather than retreating from it or futilely trying to remove it. So in other words, when faced with ageism or false perceptions about aging, we don't have to be angry or overly aggressive in handling it, nor should we retreat from it and totally be silent. There's a way of dealing with ageism issues when we encounter them that is benign and yet effective. So, for example, my style a lot of times is to use humor, is to kind of, lighten the mood. So, for example, and this actually happened to me, I was at a supermarket checkout, and the cashier, who was clearly decades younger than me, said, "Did you find everything you needed today, young lady?"
Yeah.
So I said, oh, I'm sorry. Do you have eye problems? I'm not a young lady. I'm an old lady, and I'm okay with it. And guess what? You can be okay with it too. And that brought a grin to her face. So it's like acknowledging that there was a disconnect there and offering a solution. I'm okay with being old, because she was obviously trying to make me feel better about being old. She assumed that my feeling about being old was not a positive one. So she was going to call me young. And I just kind of correct her to say, don't call me young. I am old, and that's a good thing.
Yeah.
So that's one way of handling it.
Just a second. Do you want to just
Yeah,
define what ageism is, just to make sure when we use that term,
sure.
we need to make sure everybody
Absolutely.
understands?
Absolutely. Ageism is a form of discrimination based solely on chronological age. So we can be ageist toward older people, we can be ageist toward younger people. Every time we make a comment about, oh, those young people, their noses are always in their phones, or, any kind of stereotyping based solely on age is discrimination, just like racism or sexism or homophobia. And it's as harmful, it can be as harmful to people as any of those other forms of discrimination.
Okay.
So
So that's
so we can, just deal with that. Yeah.
okay. So that's one. That's one strategy. And I
Yeah.
interrupted you. So two.
The second strategy is to be skeptical. Let's not just take everything at face value. If something doesn't feel right, let's kind of question it and say, no, that doesn't sit right with me. So a good example of that is the phrase, if anyone has ever heard the phrase silver tsunami or gray tsunami, that phrase came up based on baby boomers like me saying that there's so many of us that we're going to wipe out Social Security, we're wiping out Medicare, we're wiping out the resources of our country. First of all, by the way, there are more millennials now than there are boomers, so the millennials are the biggest generation. But I didn't like that feeling about it. We're being a threat. We're not a threat. Actually, I decided to recast that and say we're not a silver tsunami, we're a silver reservoir. We have all of these gifts and skills and knowledge that are pent up like a reservoir that has a life-giving element. If we could just, if our society could open the floodgates and let us be more into society, not try and kick us out of jobs sooner or not marginalize us, we could actually create a more abundant society. So that's another way, is to be skeptical. Don't take everything at face value if it doesn't feel right. Another strategy is to be broad-minded. Look peripherally as you move forward rather than only straight ahead or in the rearview mirror. Just like when you're driving, I would hope that we don't just look straight ahead or in the rearview mirror. We're looking from side to side occasionally, especially when we come to intersections. So we want to know what other options are out there. So the way I explain being broad-minded is to use the improvisational comedy technique of yes and. If you've ever seen an improvisational comedy troupe, the audience throws them some kind of premise. You're all on a desert island. You're stranded on a desert island. That's the yes part. What do you do with that yes? Where do you take it? Where do you go with it? So the comedy troupe might say, yeah, we're all on a desert island, but look, I see a whole pod of dolphins swimming. Let's each jump on a dolphin and we can get off the island. So it's the yes plus what you do with the yes. So we can be more broad-minded in our lives. We're all familiar with our yeses. This is my life. This is where I live. This is who I am. This is what I like to do. And it's the and that's important. What's your and? What's your additional? What are you doing with the skills you have? Where else can you go? So that's a third strategy, is to be more broad-minded.
And I
And
think I'm going to interrupt again. And
yeah,
I
yeah.
think the yes and the challenge is we like to say yes, but
Yeah. Good point.
and
Yep.
yes, but I'm this age or physically facing this challenge or and the and really is an opener.
Yeah, I like what you just brought out, because to me, if you say yes, but, it's like you have now delineated the yes as everything there is.
Right.
That you set a limit on it, and that's your universe. The but puts a borderline around that universe. The and opens the borders and says that's not all there is. So I love that. I love your response to that. I'm going to keep that one in mind. I may use that if you don't mind.
Go right ahead. I use your stuff, so
And that's what this is all about. It's all about sharing this information. When I give presentations, I tell people, you're my ambassadors now. I want you to go forth and you use what you've learned and spread that word.
yeah,
So,
yeah.
and excuse me, the fourth sideways approach is to be daring.
Mhm.
Be open to the unexpected rather than try to control what you encounter at the moment. So let's see older age as a just as adventurous a time as childhood or middle age. We can still be adventurous. We can still be daring. And one great way to be daring that I think a lot of us as we get older don't think about is to keep forming relationships with people who are old, significantly older than us and significantly younger than us. Be intergenerational. That's really being daring. And a lot of times older people think, well, I'm going to this party, but what if I'm the only old person there? If you're the only old person there, great. You can be the role model. You can go up to young people and start interacting with them and maybe change their minds a bit about what it's like to be an old person. Hey, this old person's kind of cool,
Yeah.
and give them the options of what they might be like when they get older. So that's kind of
Yeah.
that's a fourth strategy.
And I like that. I like that word daring.
Hmm.
And that goes with yes and
Right,
how to move beyond what we think is expected kind of thing. Yeah.
right, right, exactly.
Yeah. I this past year realized, okay, I talk about intergenerational stuff all the time, and I'm just at a point in my life. I don't have many relationships with children or teenagers right now. They're just in our family systems. They aren't there. In the community that I live in, there are. I haven't been there very long, so I volunteered with our. It's a ecumenical youth group in town.
Hmm.
I
Hmm.
thought, okay, this is going to be great. I'm going to connect with junior high or middle school and high school students. And I thought that would be the intergenerational experience. What I did not expect, and it's just absolutely beautiful, is I am not the oldest at 62. I am not the oldest volunteer.
Yeah.
And Nora is in her early 80s. And so suddenly I have broadened I have dared to broaden my relationships literally now spanning 60 years. And I've had a little bit of
Good
break
for you.
because of my travel, but I just met with them on Sunday. I miss the kids and hear what they're doing. So yeah,
Good for
that was
you.
my dare of last year.
Good for you. And what I would like to point out too is people may feel that they don't have anybody immediately younger that they can connect with. There are some really excellent programs that can allow people to connect virtually with younger people. Have participated in a program called Sages and
Seekers,
Seekers
yep.
that would pair an older person, the sage, and the younger person, the seeker, in conversation, and those relationships can keep going and keep thriving. And what we discover is both ends of the spectrum are sages, and both ends of the spectrum are seekers. So those labels actually are permeable, and we can be both at the same time, and it's a wonderful thing. So I would suggest for people to just go online and look up intergenerational programs. There's some great other organizations that will do
Yeah,
that.
I didn't know Sages and Seekers was an online program. I've only seen it in person, so I'm going to keep that in mind.
Hmm.
So, Jeanette, the language that you use, the metaphors you use, I just entertained me and stretched me throughout the book. So let's
Good.
talk about weirdness. I love and I love your metaphor about calling older people weeds instead of over the hill. So I'll let you explain yourself.
Weeds. Yeah, I like to kind of stop people in their tracks, you know. Um, so old people, a lot of times we feel marginalized. We feel like we're put out to pasture, kind of thing, and like we're just kind of there to deal with. How do we take care of the old people? Yes, old people need to be taken care of, just like kids and middle-aged people need to be taken care of. We all need care, but to see us as some kind of bothersome population that the society has to contend with, well, I thought, well, that's the equivalent of weeds. When we look at weeds, we think, well, they're just weeds are a nuisance. They cling to things that they're hard to get rid of, and we don't like the way they look. But when you think about weeds, weeds are tenacious. If you've ever seen a weed growing through a crack in the cement, and I have seen that many times walking around Portland and Charlotte, New York, we're still hanging in there. We have resilience. We can have strength from years and years of practice being resilient. So we're like weeds in that way. Another very important way in which we're like weeds is, well, what's a weed? Who decides what a weed is? Nature doesn't decide that. Humans do. Well, one person's weed could be someone else's medicine. Think of chamomile. Chamomile is a weed, and yet you make tea out of it. There are all kinds of weeds that have medicinal properties if we have explored it. Well, we look at a weed as useless. We look at an old person as useless, but that person could actually provide healing and education and knowledge and something very vital. So that's just a quirky way of looking at old people like weeds. As far as over the hill, that's a phrase I really want to eliminate from our vocabulary.
Reach on. Yes, yes.
In my opinion, no one ever is over the hill. And here's why. What does it take to climb a hill? You need experience. You need strength. Perhaps you need some advice from someone else who's climbed a hill before, have somebody show you the route, or you need certain equipment. What kind of equipment do I need? So you need certain kind of education. So we're all climbing hills all the time. And this is where I see the idea of over the hill. No one is ever over the hill. Where we are, especially we older people, we're at the top of a particular hill. And what we see when we get to the top of that hill are other hills in the distance yet to climb that we didn't even know existed when we were at the bottom of the hill before we climbed it. So we get to the top of the hill, we see more hills. We climb that hill, we see more hills. We older people are the master climbers. We continue to climb because we continue to face challenges that occur as we get older, such as the changes that occur in our bodies. I mean, I'm not delusional about getting older. Yeah, our bodies tend to wear out from age, but we deal with it and we find ways of dealing with it. So, and the biggest change that we overcome is beginning to lose people our own age. We lose spouses, we lose partners, we lose friends to death. We're the master climbers and we're the master changers. We're coping with change all the time. So don't underestimate old people. We're doing it all. And if you want to know what change is like and what climbing is like, ask somebody like me. That's the long and short of it. So that's the quirky ways of dealing with those kinds of metaphors.
Well, the other thing that this metaphor about over the hill brings to me is, people pay a lot of money to go down a hill, right? Think about skiing, People pay a lot of money to go down a hill. So why is going down the slope the bad part of the climb? There's beauty in the speed that can happen, and not by me. I'm not a skier, but it is uphill. But it's also some of the exhilaration that comes as well. So.
Well, and the flip side of that is people pay a lot of money to have guides that bring them up Mount Everest.
Exactly.
So, both the climb and the only thing is just going downhill, seeing downhill as a negative thing.
Right.
And like I said, there are certain ways in which we do deteriorate and decline, but there's so many other positive ways about getting older that we're not even aware of. And I love to emphasize that, especially when it comes to the way our brains change as we get older.
Right.
There are lots of assets in our brains as we get older.
Well, and there's this sense that time moves faster. I think that's part of the downward time. Our sense of time and moving faster. There are all kinds of ways we can take that metaphor and twist it and look at it sideways and upside down.
Well, I love the playing with it. That's the whole point. Play with these metaphors. Try and find ways in which they have meaning to you.
Yeah, exactly. In the book, you talk about one of the experiences that you had, moved by your passion and your frustration and anger with a greeting card company. And you talk about the power of one. And why don't you tell that story and why this idea of the power of one is something that you encourage others to be aware of?
Sure, great. This is what happened. I'm 73, as I said, but when I was 67, I got a card, one of these over the hill birthday cards from a friend of mine, who thought it was funny. And I sort of get the stereotype business, but I had it. with the over the hill business. So I looked at the card and I looked at the back of the card, turned it over, and on the back I saw the card company that produced the card. And it's one of the big card companies in the country. And so I went online and I looked up where the company was located and the name of the CEO. I whited out my friend's signature. Inside the card, I wrote, Dear so-and-so, the CEO, I am a 67-year-old gerontologist, and let me explain to you why this card is ageist and why it's harmful. Why you wouldn't put out a racist card or a sexist card or a homophobic card, but putting out an ageist card like this can be equally harmful. And I gave my little screed in there as to why, this should not be the case. I put the card in a different envelope, addressed it to the CEO at the company headquarters, and mailed it. And I just, kind of had to vent. I thought, I've had it. I just had to have my say. 2 weeks later, I get a letter from the director of corporate communications thanking me for the card. Dear Jeanette, dear Miss Leardi, thank you for writing, et cetera, et cetera. And she said, and I have forwarded it to our creative teams in the hope that we will begin to discuss creating a more pro-aging line of cards. And a couple of months later, that company started putting out cards that, were positive about aging, were encouraging about aging. Now, they still put out the over-the-hill black balloon birthday cards. I didn't get them to stop that. But I made a difference. And I'm not deluding myself to think that my card was the one that shifted. I bet they got a whole bunch of people to give their feedback about this. And maybe my card was the card that broke the camel's back. I don't know. But that's the power of one. A lot of times we as individuals think, well, what can I do as an individual? I'm only an individual. How can I change aging? I say, start with your own little sphere of influence, your family, your friends. Don't let a negative comment about aging go by. Don't let somebody make fun of old people in your presence. As I said, there are strategies for coping with that. Use humor or use some education. Well, that's not really true. My understanding is that's not really true about older adults, and explain why. So you start with your close sphere of influence, but your sphere of influence, make it more permeable. Think of it as wider than that. If you see a headline on a story that calls a woman a granny, an old woman a granny, and she's not a grandmother, or B, she's a grandmother, but it has nothing to do with the article itself, write a letter to the editor or call it out on social media. It's not right to call a person this. So we have a voice in the media. If you see an ad that makes fun of old people, you see a video or on TV and a commercial, find out the company and write to the company. So expand your sphere of influence. And enough powers of one make powers of a group. And when those are multiplied, that's when the change happens. So that's what I mean by the power of one.
Yeah.
Think of yourself as more powerful than you may think of yourself now. You really are more powerful than you know.
Well, and we have influence, right?
Yes.
Yes. So I was at camp last week, family camp, and on Thursday night, we every year kind of have dancing, and there's some traditional dances we do just at camp. And then, people will say, well, pull up this, and that's, something they do at school or whatever. And a new song to me came up, and apparently I can't pull up the name of it. And apparently it comes from a kid's movie. And somebody explained to me that in their school, she's a teacher, they use this as kind of a break in the middle of the day to get the kids up and moving. And there's a dance that they do to this. And in the middle of the chorus, there's a phrase. It says, walk like granny. And I went,
hey.
But all the people around me, they're like, yeah, we know. It's like, okay, you've been listening to me. They get it. It goes by really quickly, and the kids really are just kind of turning in a circle. They aren't really, at least the ones who were there, weren't acting like, stereotypical granny. But I'm taking to heart your power of one, and maybe I should take a look at that song and really where it came from and say, I think it's in a movie too. It may be hard to change that completely, but oh man, it's just, little phrases that come and things that we hear or
Right.
lines
Right.
in a movie or whatnot. But the influence that I've had over my loved ones and my friends, they get it. They get it. They even took a picture of me sitting there by the side, not dancing, going like this. And everybody knew what I was doing and when I was protesting.
And you've called to mind something that actually a lot of schools do, which we
Yeah,
gerontologists really want to stop
yeah,
seeing.
yeah,
And that is when they celebrate the 100th day of
yeah,
school, they ask kids to come in dressed as 100-year-old
yeah,
people. So they come in with the gray wigs, with wrinkles painted
yeah,
on their
yeah.
face, using canes and walkers and everything. A lot of old people have wrinkles and use canes and walkers and all of that, but that should not be the association you have when you think of a 100-year-old person. And by the way, research shows that children as young as 3 years old can start to have ageist views about getting older. So instead, and based on feedback from parents and other people, some schools have changed that event. And instead of having kids dressed as 100-year-old people to mark the 100th day of school, which should be a cumulative celebration, you've spent all these 100 days and learned 100 days worth of stuff. Put a penny in a jar every day, and at the end of 100 days, see what 100 pennies look like.
Right.
That it's cumulative. So there are ways, and if you find that your neighborhood school is doing certain things that are ageist, go talk to the teachers, go talk to the principal, and offer a better way. That's the power of one. So I commend you, Beth, for for wanting to make that change.
And just to note that the American Society on Aging has a toolkit that's available,
Yes.
and you can go to the website and take a look at ageism awareness and maybe underneath the Ageism Awareness Day. But that's something that we have talked about at ASA many, many times, and were
Right.
able to pull together that toolkit last year.
Right. Right. Yeah, there are ways, there are solutions. You don't have to invent the wheel on your own. There are lots of resources. There's a great website called oldschool.info it's a clearinghouse. It has everything, lots of things you want to know about ageism and what to do about it.
Old,
So I highly recommend that.
Old School Hub.
Old School Hub, right. But their URL is oldschool.info. I still believe that's what it
Yeah,
is.
yeah, yeah. Same URL. They just kind of rebranded it a little bit.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So, talk about the importance of us asking right side up questions whenever we're confronted with a situation of age bias. And you kind of maybe hinted at this a little bit using your humor example, but what do you mean by right side up questions?
So again, with the idea of aging sideways, and we've tilted our heads a little bit as to looking at aging. Well, now we straighten our heads up, we take the blinders off, and we see what are the right questions to ask, the right side up questions to ask when we're confronted by these aging issues that are negative and untrue. So I come up with 6 questions. One question is, where or when have I seen this happen before? When something feels and looks like discrimination, where have I seen this happen before? A lot of times, different types of discrimination, race, gender, sexual orientation, they have similarities in their approaches. What's worked to counteract other forms of discrimination, and can I apply that to age? So where have I seen this before? Another question is, who benefits from this negative situation or condition? Think about the anti-aging, and that's what it's called, the anti-aging industry of cosmetic surgery and Botox and dyeing our hair and all of that. There are a lot of people who are making lots of money keeping us afraid to get old. They want to play on our fears, our dread of aging, and so they're hoping we're going to be buying a lot of these products to take the wrinkles away. Again, you want to be flexible, you want to be daring, you want to be broad-minded. A friend of mine, her grandson came up to me, maybe about 6 years old, 6, 7 years old, came up to me and said, no, younger than that, 4 years old, 4 or 5, came up to me and said, you have wrinkles on your face. And I said, yeah, I do. Do you know how I got these wrinkles? No. I said, I've laughed a lot, and I've smiled a lot, and I've thought a lot, and I've been angry a lot. And when you go through life, and the more things you feel and the more things you learn, you're going to get these too. And these show how much you have lived. And he looked at that like, wow, that's reframing. That's seeing the truth about aging, because the wrinkles come from living long enough. If you live long enough, these happen. So why should we be fighting it? So that's one question. Who benefits from this? Find out if there's an agenda, a money-making agenda behind some of the discrimination. Here's another question. Does what I'm experiencing or witnessing have to do with age, or is it about something else? This happens especially when we talk about gerontocracy, old people running the government. By the way, if you look back to the First Continental Congress, the average life expectancy of people in the First Continental Congress was 35 to 40 years. The average age of members of the Continental Congress in 1775 was 44. So the old people were running the Continental Congress. That's a gerontocracy.
And
today, that's not the case.
And they wore white wigs to make sure that you knew that they were older.
Right. So there you are. So, let's ask if age really has something to do with it, or is it more competency? I won't get political here, but I can name you a few old people in Congress who have, ideas that one would attribute to being young. And I can name young people in Congress who have ideas that people would attribute to being very, very closed-minded and old. So in that way, in those stereotype ways. Here's another question. Why is this belief or behavior acceptable? If the answer is, well, because we've always done it that way, not good enough as an answer. I don't take that as an answer. It's like, well, we've always done it that way, but do we need to continue to do it this way? Here's another question. What if this situation didn't exist? What would happen if this negative situation didn't exist? Think of it especially in terms of older adults being denied participation in clinical trials for a new drug, especially for a condition that older people may tend to get, like diabetes or heart disease. What if that wouldn't exist? What if older people were part of the clinical trials? Well, then we would know the accurate dose of the drug to give to the older person, because old bodies are not like middle-aged bodies, which are not like childhood bodies, which is why we have pediatricians and geriatricians. By the way, we need a whole lot more geriatricians than we have now to meet the demand of our society. And finally, the last.
Can I just share with you another age limit that I learned about recently is my mom got a notice in the mail that she had to report for jury duty, but she had to fill out this form. So she filled out the form, and then she got a notification, oh, you're over the age of 80. We don't accept jurors over the age of 80. And
the reason for that is why? That's crazy. That is crazy making.
Isn't that crazy?
That's crazy.
And when we take a look at the demographics, that's automatically eliminating a significant portion, like 25% of the population. Then we're saying, okay, because only of age.
Crazy making, because there's the assumption that if you're old, you must be demented in some way. We don't, cognitively, you probably couldn't be on a jury. You couldn't make good decisions. Crazy. By the way, there should be no age limits on any profession. There should only be competency. There should be tests for competency. If you are, airline pilots, I believe some companies, they have to retire by 70 and maybe even younger. What if you're 70-year-old and you're like Sully Sullenberger, who could land a plane in the Hudson River, although he was in his 50s when he did it. But right now, I would say he could still land a plane in the Hudson River safely. So, competency should be the rule. And by the way, if you're younger and you're incompetent, you shouldn't have that job either. So that's really stupid.
Yeah.
This is what we have to fight against. This is what we raise our voices about. This is part of reacting. If you hear that or see that in an article, write a letter to the editor, write a letter to your congressperson or whoever, act on the power of one.
And it's surprising to me how many folks I run into who are like, oh, really? I should do that. I can do that. I have a voice. It's like, yes, you have a voice. You are not invisible. You are relevant. Go forth and give voice and conquer ageism.
Well, the fact is we can feel invisible because a lot of times we are made to feel invisible. Show up.
Right.
If you're at any kind of meeting that has nothing to do with age, let's say you're you're going to a meeting of your city council or whatever, you're witnessing it, and you look around you don't see enough old people there, ask why.
Right.
Just like if you don't see enough young people there, ask why. Put yourself in the place. Go there. Again, if you're at a party, you're going to be the only old person. Go to the party. Don't stop yourself from going to the party.
Yeah.
So.
Well, Jeanette, we could talk and we will talk later. This is not the end of our conversations, but before we come to the close of this podcast, there are questions that we ask of each of our guests.
Okay.
But before I do that, where can people find you if they want more information about you, or your projects and the work that you're doing?
They can go to my website. You see my name on the screen, Jeanette Leardi. It's JeanetteLeardi.com. You can go there. You can email me from there. I'm also on LinkedIn, I'm on Blue Sky, and I'm on Facebook. So you can just type in my name and you'll find me there.
I think you're the first guest to say that they're on Blue Sky. Good for you. Okay. So
Yeah.
Now for our last three questions. Are you ready?
Yep.
Okay. The first one is, when you think about how you've aged, what do you think has changed about you or grown with you that you really like about yourself?
This is going to sound very fuzzy, very weird, maybe. But I find that as I get older, I'm feeling less and less attached to my identity as an individual person. Although I believe in the power of one, yes, okay. But I feel like I'm beginning to transcend the idea of aging and just feel more in connection to everything that is. So that I'm just kind of, I won't say fading away. You can't keep a New Yorker like me from fading away. Impossible. But I feel like I'm embracing everything that is. The writer Anne Lamott has said, "We are all the ages we have ever been."
Yep.
And I'm beginning to feel more and more like I am very much in touch with myself when I was a child or a teenager or a middle-aged person. All the ages I've ever been have become far more clearer to me. And then the environment, the natural environment. I feel more connected to the natural environment and maybe to the spiritual realm. I just feel more connected to everything.
Well,
So that's how I feel.
thank you. Connectedness is all about spirituality. So, yeah,
Right.
that's, thank you for sharing that. Okay. The next question is, what has surprised you most about you as you've aged?
Well, kind of along those lines, I'm becoming more and more surprised, and this has happened only in the last couple of years, that my memories, my long-term memories of my childhood or other parts of my life are so much more vivid than they've ever been. So I can remember the details of a dress that I wore, or I can remember the details of a conversation I had when I was 10 years old with somebody. I don't know how that's happening, but I'm just finding that it's becoming very vivid to me. And that's surprising me. That's been surprising to me. I would have never predicted that.
Very interesting. Very cool. Okay. So lastly, third question. Is there someone you've met who's been in your life that has set a good example for you in aging? Someone that inspires or influences you to age abundantly?
Well, the dedication of my book, my book is dedicated to three people. The first is my maternal grandmother, and then my second and third are both my parents. But my maternal grandmother really set me on the path to aging in the way that I've aged. She was an incredible role model. She didn't speak English. She came from Italy, but I learned so much from her because she was the one who was the positive role model for someone who was resilient, who was strong, who was compassionate. And again, as I said before, children as young as age 3 can start to have negative feelings about older adults. But she instilled in me this feeling of being old is very natural, a very natural and wonderful thing to be. So old people, all throughout my life, old people were never scary to me. They were never repulsive to me. They were fascinating to me. And so I would say my grandmother. And here's the interesting thing. When I was in graduate school at the age of my early 50s, mid 50s, I was in classes with mostly people who were in their late 20s because they were going right to graduate school from college. And I was fascinated by why they, as young as they were, why would they want to study gerontology? Inevitably, no exception to this rule, they would say, well, because I had a great relationship with my grandparent, or there was this elderly couple next door that really helped me, or I had a wonderful old professor. So the having a role model, an accurate and wonderful role model at an early age can make a big effect on other people. And it's made a big effect on me.
Excellent. Thank you. And you fall in a long, long line of our guests who name a grandparent. Yeah. So that's, it's a testimony to how important those intergenerational relationships are, whether we're related.
That's right. And if you're older like me but have no grandchildren, go find some, volunteer in a school, in an elementary school. Be that kind of role model for young kids. That's quite a legacy to leave, because you can really change their minds about aging.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Jeanette, and thank you, our listeners, for listening to this episode of The Art of Aging, part of the Abundant Aging podcast series from the Center for Abundant Aging. And we want to hear from you. What's changed about you that you've, as you've aged, that you love? What has surprised you most? And how do you, or who do you identify as helping to be your abundant aging influencer? Join us at www.abundantaging.org to share your ideas. And one more time, Jeanette, where can people find you?
At my website, JeanetteLeardi.com. That would be the best place. If you want to email me, you can email me there.
Thank you. Thank you for your time, Jeanette. And
thank you.
Until we meet again. Thank you.